SHRM and CNBC-TV18 present The Human Equation in conversation with Johnny C. Taylor Jr.
Hello and welcome to this special conversation right here on CNBC-TV18. You're watching SHRM presents The Human Equation. We live in times of new technology, of new innovation, but with that comes new disruption. Now, what is the likely impact of that on HR trends, on human resource, on the work element of things, and what it means for employers and employees going forward? To tell us more about it, I have with me Mr. Johnny C. Taylor Jr., President and CEO of SHRM. Johnny, thank you so much for joining us, being a part of this conversation. I think at the very outset, there are so many changes. In fact, in just the build-up to this conversation, we were talking about new trends that we're beginning to see post-COVID. Give us a sense, before we dive into the meat of the discussion, I just want to get a sense, what are some of these new trends that you're seeing? What are some of these new disruptions? Would you identify them as perhaps sustainable as they will move forward into 2026? Or are there aspects that we need to learn or unlearn perhaps when we look at these new HR trends?
Well, we're in the middle of a really interesting moment. HR has transformed. The first major shift was around COVID.
Yeah.
In 2020, everything that we knew pre-2020 about how people respond to change, what technology can and cannot do, how their relationship with work changed on a dime because we were all forced, especially for desk workers, to work remotely. Yeah. We thought we would get back to normal pre-2020. In fact, the change has continued, it's gotten faster, it's accelerated, and it's having a significant impact on the psyche and the mindset of our employees. That's our biggest challenge now, is that people like us who worked a certain way for 10, 20, 30 years of their lives have now had the entire paradigm shifted, and that has resulted in significant anxiety amongst workers.
That's an interesting perspective, the way you put it, because pre-COVID, there were a lot of questions asked, how will I work from home?
Right.
And once that did happen, the questions were asked, how will I now work from my office?
That's right. So, or do I want to? Am I willing to? That's right.
Absolutely. So those changes are here and now.
Yes.
Let's talk about them. You've often talked about the why of the work, the why that drives productivity on one hand and fulfillment on the other.
Yes.
When you're talking about this why, and when you look at this why in the context of changes,
yes.
From an organizational standpoint, how do I, as a C-suite leader, perhaps need to redefine that why when I'm looking at it from my company perspective, from an employee perspective?
This notion of explaining on a personal level,
sure.
I need to understand my purpose. Why do I go to work? It's pretty obvious that I need to make money to provide for myself and my family. Got it.
Right.
Check. What increasingly, especially the latest generation, it started with millennials, but Generation Z in particular, are almost obsessed with the why. Why am I going to work? And the challenge for employers and organizations is to be able to articulate the why. The employees are asking the question, I want purpose, I want fulfillment in my work. At the same time, organizations are saying, we need product and we need profit as a result of your work. And we've not been able to bring those two communities together and speak the same language so that the value proposition is clear. This is what the organization gets, and this is what the employee gets. That's our challenge right now, is figuring out how to have both sides of the equation, as we talk about, see the value, the outcome that they want from their activity.
That's such an interesting new dynamic as to the perception of why by the latest generation of workers. And that's one dynamic I'll circle back to in just a moment. But while we're on the subject of the changes that we are seeing, one key change that at least has been noticed by many observers as well as leaders is the changing role of HR itself.
Yes.
Tell us, how do we understand this? How do we appreciate this changing dynamic on the role of HR?
Well, it's the natural outcome of going into a knowledge-based economy. Historically, with the Industrial Revolution, we've had all of the various eras, but this is the first time where knowledge, organizations who capture and master knowledge are going to win the race. Sure. And knowledge comes ultimately from human beings. The innovation that powers our businesses is directly the result of knowledge, and that comes to and through people. So for the first time in sort of all of our various shifts in industry, we've had to figure out now employees are more than just do what I tell you to do. Show up when I tell you to do it. Very hierarchical organizations, and now the employees have a voice because they are in fact the key to the productivity and the profit of an organization. So that's been the shift. We're now trying to figure out, and I've kind of alluded to this notion of how do you make it clear that there's balance, that this equation works for both sides? That puts HR smack in the middle. In the past, our job was to just find enough people, fire the wrong people, it was very, very simple and administrative. And I do want to say there continues to be a responsibility for organizations to do an HR administrative work. People expect to be paid, they expect their benefits to work. There are some administrative parts of the work, and they're very important. More and more, though, the strategic value add is how do I get the most out of those people? It's not enough to just get you there, but I actually want you to innovate and create so that my business explodes positively. That's where HR is at its best, is how do you figure out what motivates an employee to do this? Not just for pay, but for the good of the organization, the collective. That's our challenge right now. And for the first time, boards are saying this matters. I was with a group of CEOs recently, about 92 of them to be exact. And the conversations, I didn't know what they were going to talk about, but it settled on two topics: tariffs and talent. Those were the two conversations. I was surprised, and we broke into groups, and consistently, this group didn't know what that group was talking about, but thematically, it was tariffs, for obvious reasons, short term, but the longer term conversations were around talent. How do I find the right people, keep the right people, get rid of the wrong people, motivate people so that I and my business can succeed?
I think that's such an interesting dynamic that you're bringing for the benefit of our viewers, that this is right there.
That's right.
When we're talking of tariffs and whether it's talent, these are the two biggest issues that you found out in your conversations with senior leaders.
And these were directly from CEOs of major companies. And you can understand historically, if you're operating a small and medium-sized enterprise, which I know, for example, in India is 30-40% of your industry, I got that. Smaller companies know the value of their employees because without them, they don't have the redundancies. They don't have 5 people doing a job so that if one person drops out, that's okay. They can't afford that. So small and medium-sized businesses have always been very, very keen on understanding, motivating their employees properly. Larger enterprises, for the first time now, are now understanding how significant it is to have all of their employees heading in the right direction and committed to the organization. I do want to add one other thing that I think is really, really interesting: the generational shift. Earlier generations, the X's, the Y's, and now as we've gotten into the Z population, they have a different relationship with work. And it was already going to be different, but then COVID made it really different. During this COVID period, where many people were at home, really thinking about the value, the purpose of life, they developed a different relationship with work. They asked themselves for the first time, why do I work? For whom do I want to work? Where do I want to work? These are really different questions that we, frankly, have never seen employees at mass explore in their head. And so we as HR now are really interesting. I often say COVID was a friend to the HR profession because it, for the first time, told leaders what we do matters, more than just the administrative and personnel function, but getting the most out of employees is where HR is now strategically valuable.
On that subject of Gen Z workers and what their expectations are, you've told us what the Gen Z expects. They want to know, they want to find out what clicks beyond just the paycheck. They want a sense of fulfillment. That's, of course, something you've told us what Gen Z workers want. When you look at it from an organizational standpoint, what are the conventional lessons that the industry held firm that they now need to unlearn? And what are some new learnings they need to bring on board when you're looking at a vast population of Gen Z workers?
Two major observations. One is around the word empathy. When we ask Gen Z about leadership, in the past, and this is a generalization, but it's pretty strongly held and understood, leaders told you what to do. They were decisive, they were authoritative, etc. This generation has a lot of questions, and they feel very comfortable posing those questions to leaders, starting with why, and forcing us to answer those questions. They want empathetic leaders. And by definition, that means you just don't tell me. I want you to understand how the shoes that I walk in every day, to see me, to hear me, for me to be involved in the conversation. And organizations are adjusting to that in a really significant and profound way that we now have to explain the why.
Okay.
And that's a big part of it. So that requires leaders who use empathy and who are empaths at their heart, because people want to. The second thing, and it's really understood, is we've got to communicate better.
Okay.
Again, in the past, it was trust your leader. This person has gotten to the role of leader because they're very good, they're trusted, they have, all of the check marks. And now this generation is challenging that and saying, just because you're in a leadership position doesn't mean I have to follow you. And we've learned the distinction between you can't be a leader if you don't have followers. So you're seeing a new term evolve, which is that of followership as opposed to leadership. I think that just shift in language, as nuanced as it is, makes the point that people have to agree to follow you. You can't force them to lead you, to be led.
Right, Johnny, on that note, let's head into this very short break. We'll continue this conversation with Mr. Johnny C. Taylor Jr., President and CEO of SHRM, on the other side of this short break. Keep watching.
SHRM and CNBC-TV18 present The Human Equation in conversation with Johnny C. Taylor Jr.
Hello and welcome back to this special conversation, this special broadcast right here on CNBC-TV18. We're in conversation with Mr. Johnny C. Taylor, the President and CEO of SHRM. So Johnny, thank you so much for joining us again. We began by talking about disruptions. Let's bring in the one big disruptor. That's AI.
Those two letters, right?
The last couple of years, the changes that they've brought in. Now, without quoting any individual companies, we've seen layoffs across large players. There seems to be a correlation between adoption of this new technology and what it means in terms of hiring decisions and in terms of letting go people. We're trying to draw a causal link. The industry says there is no causal link, but there will be new opportunities that will be created. Give us your reading of the situation. Bringing in of a new technology, what does that mean for hiring and firing trends going forward?
I think there's truth on both sides of it. Let me start with, I am absolutely convinced, and I and SHRM have been a big proponent of being honest with people, there will be displacement. That is the point of the significant investment globally that companies and investors have made in AI. The goal is to be able to do the work more efficiently, and cost effectively and efficiently and with accuracy. So I think undoubtedly a lot of the work that we've done, frankly, that human beings didn't want to do anyway, the tedious, repetitive stuff, that's going to happen, and that naturally is going to result in fewer people needing to do certain roles. I was describing with you as I arrived in the airport the other day, or if you experience a fast food experience, you go in, you place your order, or if you're going through a customs line, there aren't the hordes of people who used to work on those lines anymore. Biometrically, you go in, you use your fingers, it looks into your eyes, and then all of a sudden you're in the country. Those jobs that used to be held by individuals have gone away, and I don't think they're coming back. On the other side, there are a new category of jobs. Someone has to program the new technology. Someone has to do the work, create the latest and the newest technologies. So what we're seeing is at once, companies are hiring and firing at once. And the question is, where will we net out? My guess is, and all of our data, the guess is we're going to see this significant divide, the haves and the have-nots. People who are highly skilled, highly educated, and who've embraced technology are going to have jobs. There's a question that I get from HR professionals all the time, and it says, is AI coming from my job? And I say, at some point, probably so. But the more immediate thing that you should think about is that people who embrace and are proficient in AI are going to come for your job. So not AI, but HR professionals who are proficient in AI are going to come for your job.
That's in fact a similar analogy that the industry is also giving, that it's not AI that will replace, but people armed with AI that will be coming for your jobs.
Absolutely.
So the question that I then want to ask is that large swaths of population, there's a huge IT base here, and that's of course the industry first to be impacted. But when we look at such a large base of engineers working out of India, one of the core concerns, as has been crystallized by the Minister of IT himself, is the cost of replacement. And the industry's response is that, look, we need to scale training. We need to upskill these workers. And the message from the industry is that this has to be a continuous effort. It can't be one program that you subscribe to and then after completing that certification, you're good, but rather it needs to be a continuous process. Is that what you're telling professionals going forward, the need to upskill?
Lifelong learning. It's a phrase that we've used forever, lifelong learning, but we actually didn't mean it. You could safely go to get your education, in 20 or 30 years, the shelf life, you could get through and ultimately get to retirement with slight updating of your skills.
Sure.
Now, because of the pace of change, that's not possible. We know that the half shelf of jobs is significantly shorter. All sorts of numbers say 50 to 60% of the skills that you have today will be meaningless 5 years from now, which means we now have to commit. The new norm, or arguably the new abnormal, is that one is going to have to constantly learn and retrain. And thus, a big conversation is that's occurring is around lifelong learning and reskilling and upskilling constantly. Again, that's a very different shift. We used to go through your formal education, perhaps some post-secondary education, college, graduate degrees, and then you were safe, essentially. That's not the world anymore. Even people who are highly, highly educated are learning that what they were trained to do a year later could be less relevant and less necessary. I give an example. The graduating class of 2024, and now this is in the US, some of the highest levels of unemployment, double the overall graduating class, are in computer science, information systems, computer engineering. Now you think about this. These were the jobs that 5 years ago, everyone was at a coding camp. Everyone was being encouraged to learn these skills because these were guaranteed jobs. And now those jobs are being impacted directly by AI. And we've now got to figure out, what do we do with these people who've invested years and their parents have spent thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in some cases for their education? What do we do with them now? What is the prospect for that person who is trained to be a computer engineer or a coder when AI can do that work faster, less expensively, and increasingly more accurate than the individual?
Great. Johnny, we're nearing the end of this conversation, so let me try to sum all of this together.
Yes.
And let me get a few thoughts on the broad trends that you see going forward. You've given us a very good lens of the COVID and what it did in terms of expectations from an employee perspective. From a logistical standpoint, what organizations had to do to manage talent while they're working from home, and then this transition back to office. Now we have AI as the big disruptor. We have new technology. What, to your mind, are some of the key trends that you will watch for as we move forward into 2026 and then beyond?
Reskilling.
Okay.
How quickly can we reskill and at what level of quality? Secondly, around AI, how quickly will it happen? That's the big question, is if in fact we're going to have displacement and we're going to try to reskill, how much time do we have before certain of those jobs go away? And thirdly, managing a multi-generational workforce. I've been looking at the data here. In the United States, about 20% of the US workforce is 65 and older. Here in India, you have a significant population of older workers now who are extending the period during which they're going to work. That means from a management standpoint, you've got to know what the 27-year-old wants and needs and what the 67-year-old wants and needs. That has created a level of stress on managers, people managers, that we have to solve for. So trending, we're going to see big focus on reskilling. We're going to AI adoption as a part of reskilling, but managing this multi-generational workforce is perhaps the most significant trending issue that we have. Couple that with this focus on empathetic leaders. People are going to have to, again, understand what is important. What does the 67-year-old woman experience in the work, and what does the 27-year-old young man experience, and how do we manage them all so that they feel like they have purpose, fulfillment, that they are seen, valued, and respected in the workplace?
My one final question to you. SHRM completes 20 years here in India. You're here in New Delhi, the national capital. As you complete this trip, what are some of the takeaways from you? What is your India team telling you about HR trends and HR trends that you see emerging out of India?
Right.
What is the message to you?
There are three things. One, this is the festival of work. The campaign here, the narrative is around celebrating work. And that's a surprise because oftentimes work is seen as a negative thing. In fact, our Indian counterparts have actually shifted the conversation and the dialogue to one about celebrating work. Secondly, human-centric work. Even if the machines are going to do some of the work, it is still ultimately, there are things that only uniquely human beings can do. And so the HR profession in India is becoming, they're leaders literally around the globe on focusing on, and maybe it's because of your BPO process, like you have some things, your GCCs, you have things that the rest of the world hasn't seen done really, really well. So you know the importance of human-centric HR. And then finally, productivity. We've got to figure out how to increase productivity. Labor participation is one thing, but our colleagues in India are saying, and we need productivity. And I think you achieve that by this new equation. When you and I talk about the equation of work, it is AI plus HI will equal the new ROI. So it's not simply how do we get the most out of people, how do we take people and machines to produce the new return on investment for companies and organizations and government.
That's such an interesting anecdote that I'll walk away with, which is AI plus HI leads to ROI. Thanks so much for that, Johnny. This has been such an interesting conversation. Thank you so much for sharing insights on some of the key changes that we're seeing across the world, here in India as well. And we hope to stay connected to learn more about what excites you and what are the trends that you keep seeing with respect to HR. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thank you, my friend.
SHRM and CNBC-TV18 present The Human Equation in conversation with Johnny C. Taylor Jr.